capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I
It's
know.
really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy Strong's. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. Tonight we're going to be continuing on in our series covering Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. We are on Chapter 6. We are talking about early women's lib in the United States. So just in an era where people are toying with the idea that potentially, just possibly, women are incapable of being autonomous, rational people who can make their own decisions about what they do with their life. So we were talking last time about perspectives from a women's college, an early women's college, and they were scandalized. I backed up the audio just a little bit so we can listen to it again, but they were scandalized that in an anatomy class they were drawing chalkboard depictions of, brace yourselves, the human heart. Yes, I know, it's quite scandalous. So that's the era that we're dealing with right now. It's a rather silly time. Yeah, that reminds me of a Monty Python quote, but I can't quite grasp it. Thanks for the follow, loveth001. How's it going tonight? We're talking about People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. Going to be reading into the final section of Chapter 6. I'm hoping. Let's see, how much do we have left here? So we have just almost half an hour, just under half an hour left, about 25 minutes left of audiobook. And usually the end, 5 or so minutes is just the audiobook reader giving their own opinion. We tend to skip that sort of thing, but we'll see how it goes tonight. And as always, this is a learning space. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. The only bad questions are the ones asked in bad faith. Otherwise, I always enjoy helping people learn and helping people gain a better perspective on the world. And this is a very important book that takes a very straightforward, clear-eyed view of American history. And instead of whitewashing it and sanitizing it and, adding in all the narrative embellishments that have been collected over the years to make America seem like something that it is not and never has been, it looks very directly at the people that we're hurting most since the time that settlers from Europe landed on this continent. So I'm going to go ahead and share this to a few groups to let people know. And then we will get into it real soon. Let's see. All right, let's pull up the audio here then. Oh, I'm gonna sneeze. 1 second. Oh. So I haven't been streaming as much lately. Been very busy with stuff. such as buying a house. So that's taking up my Wednesday slot altogether. So my wife and I are in the process of trying to find a house to buy. So that has taken our Wednesday evenings. I think we're getting pretty close. Our credit is improving. We did the things on the list that the mortgage lender asked us to do in order to get a better rate and a higher loan amount. And so we are many steps closer to actually being able to put in an offer. And once we get to that point, I think we're for sure going to find something pretty quickly, because we found a lot of good ones that are within even our current budget, and that meet our needs. So that's exciting, but it does take up a lot of time. So I've been having to skip a lot of episodes, and then my brother was in town the other weekend, so that took out time as well. So, all right. Well, I think I'm ready to get into the book, and as usual, be pausing to give my own commentary, my own narrative, and respond to anything that you guys are thinking about.
In 1821, Willard founded the Troy Female Seminary, the first recognized institution for the education of girls. She wrote later of how she upset people by teaching her students about the human body. Quote, "Mothers visiting a class at the seminary in the early 30s were so shocked at the sight of a pupil drawing a heart, arteries, and veins on a blackboard to explain the circulation of the blood that they left the room in shame and dismay."
That's what I was just talking about before we started. Scandalized that they thought that people would be depicting, not even. I mean, there were not photographs in the 1830s, but not even a very lifelike depiction, but a chalk drawing of the circulatory system. Like, oh my, it's a very strange time to live in, I would imagine. Incredible shame heaped upon women to even think about or talk about any parts of the body, let alone the most scandalous parts, of course. But yeah. So anyway, continuing out.
To preserve the modesty of the girls and spare them too frequent agitation, heavy paper was pasted over the pages in their textbooks which depicted the human body. Women struggled to enter the all-male professional schools. Dr. Harriet Hunt, a woman physician who began to practice in 1835, was twice refused admission to Harvard Medical School, but she carried on her practice, mostly among women and children. She believed strongly in diet, exercise, hygiene, and mental health. She organized a ladies' physiological society in 1843, where she gave monthly talks. She remained single, defying convention here, too. Elizabeth Blackwell got her medical degree in 1849, having overcome many rebuffs before being admitted to Geneva College. She then set up the New York Dispensary for Poor Women and Children, quote, "to give to poor women an opportunity for consulting physicians of their own sex," unquote. In her first annual report, she wrote, quote, "My first medical consultation was a curious experience. In a severe case of pneumonia in an elderly lady, I called in consultation a kind-hearted physician of high standing. This gentleman, after seeing the patient, went with me into the parlor. Then he began to walk about the room in some agitation, exclaiming, 'A most extraordinary case. Such a one never happened to me before. I really do not know what to do.' I listened in surprise and much perplexity, as it was a clear case of pneumonia, and of no unusual degree of danger, until at last I discovered that his perplexity related to me, not to the patient,
Of course.
and to the propriety of consulting with a lady physician."
What could a lady possibly?
Oberlin College pioneered in the admission of women, but the first girl admitted to the theology school there, Antoinette Brown, who graduated in 1850, found that her name was left off the class list. With Lucy Stone, Oberlin found a formidable resistor. She was active in the Peace Society and in anti-slavery work, taught colored students, and organized a debating club for girls. She was chosen to write the commencement address, then was told it would have to be read by a man.
I'm just always so struck at just how fragile these societies were at the time. Like, they could not wrap their head around mentally a woman giving a speech at a college to, well, to anyone, but let alone a commencement speech. And I'm sure I'm sure there was plenty of calls that this be stopped, lest Western society unravel. It seems like Western society is always at stake anytime there's the least little bit of change, and they take these tiny, insignificant changes to the world as just existential threats. To me, that's just the definition of fragility. And I don't think that the conservatives are really any different today. They are still in the same mindset that any little change to the way things are is a complete threat to our entire way of life. So that we cannot have any sort of equality of any kind, let alone equity. Otherwise, everything will just fall apart. And it's like, at the same time, they just ramble on about how Western civilization is the strongest, most prestigious. I don't even know if you call it an institution, but institution in history. Like, clearly the superior to all others throughout time and space. And yet all it takes to crumble it is what, I guess in the modern day, a black person taking on a role that originally was written for a white person in a comic book, or a woman appearing in any prominent role. And that's all it takes, apparently. So it fits very well into fascist ideology that your enemy is simultaneously incredibly weak and inferior, but at the same time very strong and one step away from crushing every one of us, the good people of the world, under their boot heel. So a lot fits very well together in those two ideologies, and they're really not all that different. And one comes from another, so.
She refused to write it. Lucy Stone began lecturing on women's rights in 1847 in a church in Gardner, Massachusetts, where her brother was a minister. She was tiny, weighed about 100 pounds, was a marvelous speaker. As lecturer for the American Anti-Slavery Society, she was, at various times, deluged with cold water, sent reeling by a thrown book, attacked by mobs. When she married Henry Blackwell, they joined hands at their wedding and read a statement. While we acknowledge our mutual affection by publicly assuming the relationship of husband and wife, we deem it a duty to declare that this act on our part implies no sanction of, nor promise of, voluntary obedience to such of the present laws of marriage as refuse to recognize the wife as an independent, rational being, while they confer upon the husband an injurious and unnatural superiority. She was one of the first to refuse to give up her name after marriage. She was Mrs. Stone.
Think about that too. This is an institution that survives till today. This convention that women need to give up their last name, otherwise they, run the risk again. I see Jared is not able to join tonight. That's too bad. But yeah, like they still frame it the same way, as though if women don't give up their maiden name and take on the name of their husband, well, whew, there goes Western civilization. And again, it's just this gigantic edifice of Western civilization that has stood for thousands of years and been handed down from the Romans originally, is going to crumble because a few women don't take on their husbands' names, or it even becomes a trend. Ooh. But guess what? None of that is really a threat to anybody. Like, my wife did not take on my last name, and you know, she's she's not calling all the shots and then ruling over me with an iron fist. Believe it or not, I have equal standing in our marriage. And that's another thing that conservatives seem to be unable to wrap their heads around is how there could not be leaders and followers and nothing in between ever, as though it's impossible for two different people to ever be on equal footing. It seems to be an impossibility in their way of thinking. And I think that's why they get so afraid of this sort of thing, because they believe that if any downtrodden class of people were to get power, then it would necessarily mean that they would end up getting power over them. And of course, they would just switch, they would just turn the tables and turn it around right on them and treat them as badly as they now treat that particular minority group. And I mean, that's both an indictment of their worldview as inherently prejudicial, inherently oppressive, but also just shows a lack of imagination, that you cannot imagine any sort of equality between different people. Yeah, I just always thought that was very strange. It's a strange way of viewing the world. Very black and white, no shades of gray allowed anywhere.
When she refused to pay taxes because she was not represented in the government, officials took all her household goods in payment, even her baby's cradle. After Amelia Bloomer, a postmistress in a small town in New York State, developed the bloomer, women activists adopted it in place of the old whalebone bodice, the corsets and petticoats.
Hey, that's something I did not know. Bloomer's actually named after someone named Bloomer. I always just thought it was, somewhat descriptive of what they were, because they look kind of just like a blooming flower, billowing all over the place. So interesting. And that took the place of whalebone corsets, which, were definitely a metaphor and also a physical manifestation of male domination of women at that time. Petticoats as well, all meant to weigh down and make life harder for women. Again, we see vestiges of this lasting till today, where women's clothing is always given very small, often unusable pockets. And then this comes from the time when women's suffrage was in full swing, and probably even before, they were afraid of women being able to carry around things that were hidden, lest they take dangerous ideas like women's suffrage and put them on a pamphlet and pass it out to other women. Again, another threat in their minds to the entirety of Western civilization. All right, let's move on.
Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was one of the leaders of the feminist movement in this period, told of how she first saw a cousin of hers wearing bloomers. Quote, "To see my cousin with a lamp in one hand and a baby in the other walk upstairs with ease and grace while, with flowing robes, I pulled myself up with difficulty, lamp and baby out of the question, readily convinced me that there was sore need of reform in women's dress, and I promptly donned a similar costume."
There's a good podcast called Dressed, The History of Fashion. And as someone myself who, I've never watched a fashion show by choice. As you can maybe tell, I don't care too much about fashion. I still found this podcast incredibly interesting, because it talks about the intersection of feminism and fashion throughout the ages, and they really dive deep into each subject. So, you learn about something that you take for granted, some article of clothing or way of dress, and you learn that there's actually a whole lot of hierarchy, misogyny, patriarchy behind it, oftentimes. So it's a really good one. I'm going to look it up right now on Pod News. which is a great website if you ever want to find a podcast. Because all you have to do is search for the name, and then it will give you links to every platform that particular podcast is on. So like with this one, Dressed, just search for it. Maybe that was two. Dressed, the history of fashion. Here we go. So it's on a bunch of different podcast players. But if you ever want to share a podcast too, it's also very convenient for that, because you don't have to worry about what podcast player the person you're sharing it with uses, because it will give them a link right to it. So here we go. Dressed, the history of fashion. There you go. Highly recommend that one. But yeah, it's amazing. You never really think about fashion in that sort of way. I mean, I guess I knew that growing up, we were taught that the Chinese foot binding practice was done in order to, physically prevent women from being able to run away from bad situations. And then I think in high school we got to the point where it was then related to the idea of wearing high heels and how that was meant to make it harder for women to run, and that sort of thing too. But you never really go all that much further. But this podcast that I just shared will definitely help you learn even more about that. Yeah, here we go. More of the book. Let's get back into it.
Women, after becoming involved in other movements of reform, anti-slavery, temperance, dress styles, prison conditions, turned, emboldened and experienced, to their own situation. Angelina Grimke, a Southern white woman who became a fierce speaker and organizer against slavery, saw that movement leading further. Quote, "Let us all first wake up the nation to lift 1,000,000 slaves of both sexes from the dust and turn them into men, and then it will be an easy matter to take females from their knees and set them on their feet, or, in other words, transform them from babies into women."
It's a shame that sort of intersectional feminism fell away when push came to shove, when it was time for women in the U.S. to actually make a concerted push towards voting rights. There came a time when they had to choose, is it going to be voting rights for all women or just white women? And that first wave of feminism, they chose equality for white women, which set back, non-white women suffrage for decades. And it was, it's much further on before they gained voting rights. And then the same thing happened with the second wave feminism, when the idea was just to get white women who wanted to have equality with men into better job situations, so that they could enter the workforce as much and in all the realms that they chose. But again, non-white women got kind of left behind in all of that. So it's taken many iterations before we finally come back to a mainstream feminism that does look at things intersectionally. It's really just been this, I don't know, for in third or fourth wave feminism at this point, but it's the modern version that has finally come back to intersectionality. But it just goes to show that it's very easy to look back on a people's in a certain time and just think of them as dumb and ignorant and incapable of all the progressive thought that we see on display today. But that's almost never the the case, there are almost always people that are, they're seen as way ahead of their time, but really it's just that there's always a group of people that does see things more clearly than society at large. And much of that has to do with just the inertia and the self-reinforcement of societal norms, so that more progressive ideas are never even really considered by the masses. But these people always exist, There was slavery abolitionists as long as there has been slavery. There has been, equal rights for all races as long as there has been the concept of race. So it just, the thing that is different is what ideas are in the mainstream and what ideas are considered palatable to the average person. But to just, just act condescendingly to all of history because not everyone was on board of what is now considered matters of course. It's not a charitable way of looking at history, and it's not an accurate way of looking at history. So it's important to recognize that these, these ideas are not new, and, it doesn't really matter what ideology you follow. There's been people throughout history who have wanted the same thing. It's just whether or not they were in a position to spread that idea or enact it in any way.
Margaret Fuller was perhaps the most formidable intellectual among the feminists. Her starting point in Woman in the 19th Century was the understanding that, quote, there exists in the minds of men a tone of feeling toward women as toward slaves.
Not at all untrue. I mean, this is, this wretched idea has been dredged back up by the manosphere. The idea that marriage is just a financial contract, a transaction where a woman is purchasing, basically, through her domestic labor, the protection and money of a man. And a man is purchasing the companionship and sex and reproduction of a woman. It's just a really disgusting way of looking at things, but it has become more popular as the manosphere has grown, and that's unfortunate. But yeah, viewing things that way, as the women need to be locked into a marriage and otherwise are destined to, well, I mean, who knows what, at best become a spinster and live with her parents the rest of her life, and at worst end up out on the street or wind up in prostitution or whatever. That's not much different than viewing women as slaves. It's just that they get to decide who their master's going to be. Otherwise, they don't really have any rights. At this point, they weren't allowed to have their own bank accounts or their own money or own their own property or any of these other things. Certainly not able to vote, even. So they were completely dependent for their entire survival on their husbands. And of course, all of this leaves out women who were not interested in marrying men, which, again, has always existed. It just has not been at the fore for very long, comparatively. At least in this iteration of civilization. So yeah, what those women were supposed to do is not even considered at this point. But yeah, and I mean, you see people like Abby Shapiro wanting to return to this sort of simplistic, heteronormative way of viewing things as though it's somehow liberating for women, because, women, if you have to go out to work, then you're just being you're being the subject of your boss, and you might as well just work for your husband instead. Yeah, there's a lot of trad femme stuff that falls in line with this very, well, I would say backwards way of thinking. But yeah, they basically want women to be a step removed from slaves. And again, women that may not want to marry a man or may not want to get married at all are not even considered in these sorts of situations. They're ridiculed, or the most kind among the trad femmes will say, "Oh, you should just suppress those feelings and marry a man anyway." Like that sounds like a horrible life to have to deny such a basic part of yourself in order to force yourself to be with someone you don't want to be with. And what man would want to be in that situation either? Why would you ever want a woman to be forced to be with you for the rest of her life? That just sounds awful. Like nothing from that relationship would ever really be willing at the root of it. Everything would be forced. Questions of even love would be just kind of off the table. So that sounds like a very sad life for the man as well. It just sounds like a really crappy, poorly thought out, overly simplistic system that really didn't work for a lot of people and still would not work today.
She continued, "We would have every arbitrary barrier thrown down. We would have every path open to woman as freely as to men. And what woman needs is not as a woman to act or rule, but as a nature to grow, as an intellect to discern, as a soul to live freely and unimpeded." There was much to overcome. One of the most popular writers of the mid-19th century, the Reverend John Todd, one of his many best-selling books, gave advice to young men on the results of masturbation, quote, "The mind is greatly deteriorated," unquote, commented on...
Hey, does that also sound like some conservative movements today? Such as the Proud Boys, a lot of these ones. A lot of the manosphere believes in that same thing too. This strange mysticism around not climaxing as a man, as though that somehow holds on to your power. Absolutely no medical basis for any of it. In fact, the opposite is there actually is medical evidence for that. Sexual gratification is something that everybody needs and makes people's lives better, whether you're by yourself or with other people. So, but yeah, and this is all just trying to force people into these rigid marriage situations. It's just that this pressure happens to be put on the man's side.
The new feminist mode of dress, quote, "Some have tried to..."
Shower.
Cool. It sounds like Amanda's going to be joining us pretty soon. So that's always fun.
"Become semi-men by putting on the bloomer dress. Let me tell you in a word why it can never be done."
I have missed something there. Putting on the bloomer dress and becoming semi-men.
Todd, one of his many best-selling books, gave advice to young men on the results of masturbation, quote, "The mind is greatly deteriorated," unquote, commented on the new feminist mode of...
It kind of just sounds like he had a bad time with it and probably felt guilty. And so he decided to project his insecurities and his feelings of being a dirty little boy all over everybody else. And again, you see this all the time in conservative figureheads. There's just so much projection that takes place. That I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Let's just move on. But yeah, you see it a lot. A lot of projection happens.
dress, quote, Some have tried to become semi-men by putting on the bloomer dress. Let me tell you in a word why it can never be done. It is this. Woman, robed and folded in her long dress, is beautiful.
It's amazing how many parallels there are till today. Like, have we ever really been different? And that's the thing is just as, you know, there have always been, you know, very sexist, misogynist men who believe the sort of stuff that this man is spouting, that women must only wear a certain style of dress or else they're not beautiful, or else they're trying to be men, or, you know, on and on. And this has always been a criticism levied at women. Every time there's a new style of dress, it's no longer feminine. It's women trying to be men. You know, that certainly happened when women started wearing pants, which for a long time in so-called Western civilization was a style of dress reserved for men. So yeah, but oh yeah, that's right. So what I was trying to say is, just as there's always been incredibly progressive people and thinkers throughout history, throughout time and space, it just depends on what was most in vogue on a society level. The same is true of these sorts of conservative figures. So we're never going to just completely do away with these sort of, you know, backwards facing troglodytes, basically. There's always going to be men who get really upset and find it a very direct threat to their ego and their entire framing of their identity if women do anything different than they expect them to do. So it's just important to keep in mind that these opinions are not necessarily new or old or anything. They always exist in one form or another, whether they are progressive or regressive or reactionary positions. There's always going to be a certain group of people that will gravitate towards each. So that's not really what we're trying to do when we're pushing a leftist movement, is convince everybody, because it's an impossibility. There will always be conservative ideas cropping up here and there. The idea is more to change what the cultural median is, what the you know, the mode of operating is that's taken for granted to the point where people don't even notice it. So just as capitalism today is that cultural mean that people don't really question it or you know, think twice about. Of course, we live in a capitalist system. We would like to push it to a point where socialism is that cultural median, where it is such a matter of course that only the very extreme outliers would ever really question it. I think there was a comment there. Hello, James. Didn't hear your notification. Oh, that's okay. You can always go back and look at the VOD on Twitch as soon as I'm done, or you can go to YouTube and view my archive there. In fact, I will post it one more time. All right, here we go. So if you ever miss any part of a show, this is where I keep all of my recordings. And since I'm restreaming, I'm using Restream, it goes directly to YouTube as I'm live recording it. So you never have to miss a show. Yeah, I know you do like to be there for the whole thing, James. And I do appreciate that. It's, you know, nice to have fans. That's for sure. And I always like having you here too, James. You you add a lot of liveliness to the conversation. So anyway, yeah. So here's this man, this Jordan Peterson of his time talking about how, well, I mean, it really is no different than when Jordan Peterson had his nuclear meltdown about uh, a plus size woman appearing on Sports Illustrated. This is no different than not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance will make me say otherwise. This man is saying the same thing, only it's, 200 years prior. Only these bloomers are unladylike, and like, you look at the old Looney Tunes sort of cartoons. They like to bloomers was like a scandalous thing at that point, where if they had some sort of a cabaret in it or something, that there's the women in their bloomers, and no one ever thought, oh well, that's not very ladylike to have bloomers. But this guy did, because it was different. So this is his Jordan Peterson moment of, bloomers are not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance will ever make me accept it as such. The only beautiful form for a woman is to have her long dress. So here, let's let's hear some more from 200-year-old Jordan Peterson.
She walks gracefully. If she attempts to run, that charm is gone.
Women can't be feminine if they run, which conveniently means that they can't then ever escape a situation they don't want to be in, unless they walk really fast, I suppose. So just funny how that tends to line up, that immobility and being feminine and graceful, for all these conservative viewers of or pundits of their time. They always seem to go hand in hand. Women shouldn't move or be able to move, otherwise they're not womanly anymore.
Take off the robes and put on pants and show the...
So that's right. So, I was wondering if that was going to be his contention with it, but yes. Having a skirt that was just as long as the dresses of the day, but then having the bloomers part being more pants looking, even though no one can see it unless you're like kicking up your dress in a cabaret or something like that. But just knowing that it exists makes her somehow less feminine in this man's mind. Putting on pants,
limbs,
showing the limbs
and mystery are
scandals.
all gone.
That's right. Yeah, if you can see a woman's ankle, what is the point of ever, going further? She's given everything up. Oh, these men. So James says, I don't think Twitch has a top fan badges like Facebook, but I might be wrong. Yeah. There are certain things that I can turn on with Twitch, where you can be like a top commenter of the night, but then I'd have to be only doing Twitch, and I'd have to stream it through Stream Elements directly. But there is a way to be like top fan of the night, but that usually is linked to also donating. So it's like who donates the most gets to be the top fan of the night.
Hey there, can't come over there.
Wow, what's up?
I'm hot.
Oh, okay. I will turn on the air conditioning so that Amanda can join us. So you're gonna have to contend with the white noise of the air conditioner.
It's soothing.
Yeah, but it also is not.
I'm just teasing. Sorry, I'm a hot person. I
Yeah.
probably just opened myself up to a can. A bit much.
So James says, I caught my dude bloomers on fire a few hours ago with one of my vape batteries. Oh no. Dude bloomers, yes. Yeah, so we were just talking, or they were talking about in the book, that this guy, this Jordan Peterson of his day, was saying that
Cute.
bloomers were unfeminine and no one was going to convince him otherwise.
Okay.
Adding pantaloons to the feminine form is unbecoming. And she has to wear her long dress instead. And be graceful and not run, ever. Otherwise, she's not womanly. It's just, it reminded me very much of Jordan Peterson getting mad at a plus size Sports Illustrated model.
Well, let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
So, like, okay, you got a problem with women wearing pants? I just want to speak.
Well, bloomers, that's the thing. Bloomers are not pants. Bloomers are undergarments that go underneath a dress, which you can't even see them unless you're in an intimate position with a woman anyway. So, like, this is all taking place in his mind. He just knows that bloomers exist.
But, like, I mean, I'm going to speak on behalf of all butt lovers everywhere.
Uh-huh.
Pants are great. You can't see anything in a dress, really. Or at least not in the current, like, phase of cottagecore. Somebody gag me. But, hey, it takes all kinds, right? Some people love butts. Other people not so much. If your name is Tina Belcher, you definitely love butts.
That's true. Absolutely true.
But also, what was the other thing he was complaining about? The plus size girl?
So I was comparing this guy from 200 years ago complaining about bloomers to Jordan Peterson today complaining about a plus size swimsuit, Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. As though in either case they were being forced to accept a new standard of feminine beauty. And no matter what the woke moralists did, they weren't going to be damned if they'd rather die than accept that as beautiful.
But, like, plus size women have historically been attractive. Like, because if a woman had more curves on her body, it meant she was able to eat more, she was able to afford, she was more wealthy.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's so much more than that, and I don't mean to minimize, but I would like to add a facet of...
It's definitely true, and it's if I could, I don't mean to cut you off, I just wanted to interject quickly that these conservatives, they always act as though their standards have just always been, as though society has always been the way that they want it. Even though, like, today, is there a single conservative who never wears pants, who's a woman? Like, there's plenty of times in history when that would have been considered scandalous and cross-dressing and all of these sorts of things.
Pants rock, though, guys. I like dresses too, but pants rock. I need them for my job.
Yeah.
I couldn't do my job in a frilly dress. It would be problematic on multiple levels.
But at what cost? You're sacrificing your gracefulness and your femininity.
Listen, let's be very clear, Mr. Peterson. I am not graceful. I'm about as graceful as a bull in a china shop, and I'm aware of this.
You're very graceful.
But I move like an ox.
No, you don't.
I don't spin around in fields of wildflowers and, oh, la-di-da. But also, like, who cares? I mean, women wear pants, big deal. Men also are really into kilts, or dresses even, for that matter.
Sure.
Look at Jonathan Van Ness.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, dresses are crazy, but also, like, men like kilts, like utility kilts. Like, they have pockets, they're breathable.
To be honest, as a man who has no butt, I would love to wear something that was not constantly falling down on me every time I bent over. So yeah, I think a kilt would be a good way of handling that.
I need a belt because my work pants almost fell off today.
Oh no. Okay. We'll deal with that for you. And James says that he had you had a loose screw from work in your pocket and a battery caught fire in his pants? Jeez.
Oh shit. That's terrible, James. Yeah, and David Bowie and Marilyn Manson wear dresses.
You said it was your vape battery? Well, maybe that's a song, James, that maybe it's time to put away the vape tricks and, you know.
Maybe get some candy
But-
cigarettes or something else instead. I know where you can buy those.
Yes, and David Bowie, Marilyn Manson, and Dennis Rodman were all treated as though they were, again, threatening all of Western civilization by
Also,
encouraging young boys to cross-dress.
what about Prince? I feel like, or was his
Well,
it's
that's
just
the
purple
thing,
and
too.
ruffles and eyeliner and
But
heels?
it was heels.
Like,
But, heels were originally worn by men as well. They're part of their dandy outfit. And then were later adopted by women.
I'm trying to see if there's documentation of Prince ever wearing a dress. But, I mean, crop tops,
Yeah, crop tops.
sequins,
Uh-huh. Ruffles, cravats.
sheer materials, pink, purple, high heels, like jewelry, things that are considered by most right box folks to be feminine. But really, like, what is feminine?
It's pretty subjective. It's in the eye of the beholder, really. What I think is feminine is not going to be the same standard as really anybody else.
Right.
The same is true for you, and everyone has a different standard of femininity for themselves and for other people as well. I might feel feminine. I don't know. Just hypothetically, I could feel feminine if I wore like a floral print. Like I wouldn't really feel feminine, but there are plenty of men who would find that feminine to ever have flowers on an article of clothing. So it's going to be different for every person.
Right.
What makes them feel feminine and what they see as feminine in others as well.
Yeah, like, I don't wear a lot of flowered patterns or, like, always have long flowing hair. Like, I like to mix it up. Sometimes my hair is super short. Sometimes I grow it out really long. I like solid colors. I like to wear pants, but I like chunky feminine sweaters and scarves, and I love jewelry. Silver jewelry. Like, minimalist stuff that I can, like, mix around. But, like, that makes me feel like myself. Even though if I laid my stuff out, like, I won't lie, I've mixed my shirts up with Zach's many times. And sometimes I've even worn them on accident and didn't realize until I got to work.
And really that was the first crack in the wall of Western civilization when that happened, right?
Yeah. The conservatives actually pulled me into the bathroom at work and demanded that I change
Yeah.
into a hot pink flowered blouse.
That's right. Alright, let's get back.
Which I'd never wear. Ugh. Hot pink
So
flowers.
this guy's like, if they expose their limbs, the mystery's all gone. Oh no.
If your imagination is that limited, you've got some other problems you probably need to work on.
Maybe he just really likes arms. And he's got an arm fetish. Oh, scandal. Oh, alright, here we go.
Look at my appendages.
In the 1830s, a pastoral letter from the General Association of Ministers of Massachusetts commanded ministers to forbid women to speak from pulpits. Quote, "When she assumes the place and tone of man, we put ourselves in self-defense against her." Unquote. Sarah Grimke, Angelina's sister, wrote in response a series of articles, Letters on the Condition of Women and the Equality of the Sexes. Quote, "During the early part of my life, my lot was cast among the butterflies of the world, and of this class of women I am constrained experience and observation that their education is miserably deficient, that they are taught to regard marriage as the one thing needed, the only avenue to distinction. She said, quote, I ask no favors for my sex. I surrender not our claim to equality. All I ask of our brethren is that they will take their feet from off our necks and permit us to stand upright on the ground which God has designed us to occupy.
Yeah, and it's funny. You look at the anti-feminist literature and cartoons of the day, and it was all the sky is falling. The sky is falling. Like, if women ever get more power, they're just going to turn around and treat us as bad as we treat them. Won't that be horrible? Got to keep women in their place forcibly.
Instead of going, hey, we've been really terrible. We should make some changes.
No, that never crosses their mind. Because they like things how it is. They like getting all the favors.
May I just step this just ever so slightly?
For sure.
I think a lot of it comes from this country's problem, universally, with accountability.
Yeah.
Like, we say we're all about it, but when it truly comes down to it, if it's something negative, we absolutely want nothing to do with it. Instead of saying, thank you for telling me, next time I'll do better.
Oh, yeah.
Or how can I be more supportive to you in that time? Or, you know, just like shifting slightly.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a real brinksmanship sort of attitude. Like, you know, once we get behind a certain idea, we cannot ever let it go, even if we don't believe in it anymore, because that would show that we were wrong. And if we're wrong, then what else could we be wrong about? It might unravel the entire foundation.
Like, small situation. I was driving to a site. I'm a job coach for autistic young adults. And we drive to job sites. And I fessed up that I made a wrong turn. I'm like, oh, we're going to be a couple minutes late. I made a wrong turn. And one of them was like, why did you admit that? I was like, oh, well, I did. I made a wrong turn. And we are going to be a couple minutes late, but the site manager said it's okay. And that they know we're coming. It's not a problem. Like...
Yeah.
But it was just so funny because it's just so ingrained. Even in someone that's like 18 years old, it's like, why would you fess up to that?
Right.
But it's like, well, I would expect you to admit when you make a mistake, so I'm going to do the same thing. And if I make a mistake, I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. But no, it's definitely really ingrained in our culture to the point where it's even unconscious. Like just today, for whatever reason, I loaded up my truck. I was going to bring a blower out to these workers. I do landscaping for a living. And I forgot the battery for my blower because I had to bring mine too. So
no.
I had to turn around on the highway and go all the way back. But I was feeling pretty ashamed about that. And I was like, oh, geez, I hope no one sees that I made a mistake and came back and, you know, because I forgot something. And then sure enough, I was so worried about that I forgot the gas can for their blower when I went out again. And so I was like, oh, crap, and I had to go back again. And I felt even worse. I was like, oh, man, I hope no one's just watching out the window, seeing how stupid I am, that I would dare make a mistake and stuff like that. So, like, but if I step back...
to. Like, you caught yourself.
I did, and it was, I was barely down the road. It's not like I was...
But you've been taught to, like, feel ashamed of that.
Yeah, and to hide it, and to just hope that no one catches you making a terrible faux pas like that.
And I'm sure odds are no one actually noticed.
No, I don't think anyone did. No one said anything about it. It's like, oh, how come you keep coming back or anything? I mean, there was hardly anyone around at the time, so... But yeah, it still is that little nagging thing in the back of your brain, and that oftentimes is just the voice of the culture that's been ingrained into you from the time you're young, and it has very little to do with rationality or reality or anything like that. All right, I think we should get back to
To me, it is perfectly clear that
definitely.
whatsoever it is morally right for a man to do, it is morally right for a woman to do. Sarah could write with power. Angelina was a firebrand speaker. Once, she spoke 6 nights in a row at the Boston Opera House to the argument of some well-meaning fellow abolitionists that they should not advocate sexual equality because it was so outrageous to the common mind that it would hurt the campaign for the abolition of slavery.
don't you hear that sort of argument all the time now? Can't have too much change. No, no, no. We can't cancel all student debt. Oh no, no, oh no, no, no. We can't possibly vote for a candidate that's too far left. Uh, Change must be very, very, very slow. Slow things down there, buddy. Incremental. We all want to get there, but we just don't want to
No,
get there too fast.
but that's just it. And it's so funny to me because I work with a lot of young people,
Hmm.
and leftists out there, they see you, they look up to you. I had a student
Well,
today.
except for that one NRA kid, but yeah.
Yeah, we're working on that, okay? That's a pet project for later when they actually show up for school.
Yeah.
But I had a student today that was like, capitalism sucks. Like, literally, out of nowhere. Absolutely no prompting whatsoever. It was like, all the money sits on the top, and they always tell you it's going to trickle down, but it never does. It's like, you're not wrong.
Yeah, and you have no power as a worker.
Yeah.
Even if you're in a union, that's more just the power to more effectively beg for the things you want.
Right, like the nurses strike right now.
Like the nurses strike right now. And while those can be powerful tools, it's even more so powerful if everyone is part owner of whatever venture they are in, when the workers actually directly own the means of production. So,
Yeah, because they're literally invested in it.
right. Yeah.
They're like,
Yeah, I like my job a lot, so I try hard to, sell my services, to make pretty designs and renderings of landscaping for clients so that you know, uh, they'll take the things that I want, because I mean, for me, there's more to it. I get more out of it because I want to, I guess it's even a little bit subversive. I want to have an avenue to insert more native plants into the local landscaping, to support pollinators, to get people to like native plants better, um, all these sorts of things. And so I do it whenever I can. But I can't deny also that because I get a 3% commission any on any bid that I successfully sell, that also is motivation to take on more bids and try harder for the company for it to be successful, because it then is much more directly tied to my success. So going from that little crumb of buy-in to
a big slice.
a big slice would be me being equal part owner of that company. And then that would not mean that there would no longer be, say, the head of maintenance, or that I would no longer be the head of the gardening department or anything like that. There would still be plenty of room for expertise. It's just that for things like, how do we divvy up the profit? How do we set working conditions? How do we schedule things? These things will be left up to everybody collectively. That's really it. That's the only difference in a worker-owned cooperative, is that you get a say on the stuff that impacts you the most.
And that's exactly how it should be, instead of this, like, figurehead really making all these decisions and just, like, Mr. Burnsing it up.
Yeah. My boss, the owner of my company, who, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He does come in to work every single day. I'm guessing he does do work as well. I don't know what he does. It doesn't have anything to do with my department, and he doesn't really seem to know what it is I'm doing ever.
He does have a lot of opinions about it.
But he's got a lot of opinions when it comes to how his money is spent. Like, he will make sure to go out of his way to, if I idle the car in the lot for just a few seconds to rush in and get something before I leave. It's my pet peeve that people turn off the engine every time they get out of the car. Or, I redo the landscaping for the office for everybody, which I get compliments on absolutely every day.
I mean, you guys, I've seen
But
it.
I heard.
It's really pretty. Sorry,
Yeah, I appreciate it.
it's really pretty.
Yeah,
Like, it's
I made a rain
waves
garden.
of purples and
Yeah.
reds and pinks and yellows. Just
Yeah, I put in a rain garden at the office, and it looks a hell of a lot better than the torn up, burnt out hostas that were growing there beforehand. And because a tree had been cut down, it was an ash tree. It got ash borer. It had to be cut down. And now all these hostas had no protection from the sun, and they were getting burnt up anyway. So my boss, my direct boss, was like, "Hey, why don't you go redesign the front of the office? It looks like crap." And you know,
customers have noticed.
and customers have noticed. Yeah, he knows for sure that we lost a $40,000 contract because the people thought, well, these people don't really know what they're doing. Look at this crappy landscaping they have at their office. He overheard them saying that as they were leaving. Um, Beyond that, though, it's it's just nice. It's something that everyone has commented on who has walked by while I'm out there. It's like, oh, this is so beautiful. Oh, this is so wonderful. What's that plan? What do you know, what's going on over here? Oh, this is coming into bloom. I get so many comments about it. It's, uh, I'm sure it has boosted the morale of the people in the office to feel like they're working for a real professional place that actually even cares about its own landscaping, not just, its clients. Um, and it's given us a chance to put it out on like Instagram and show that we know what we're doing, just show that we're professional. But I did not hear the end of it from the owner. He would come out every chance. Oh, I don't know why you're spending all my money doing that. He made sure to say my money every single time. I don't know why you're spending up all my money when you could be out getting me more contracts. And I'm like, oh, is
Maybe
and I
boom
just
power
kind of
needs to
justified it. I was like,
calm down.
yeah. And I was like, it's going to make you money. And by the way, a lot of the plants that came with that order are going to a contract that I just won. So, like, I'm doing both, guy. But, like, I did not hear the end of it. And then he sent his kids who work for the company out to, like, basically say the same thing to me. Oh, why'd you make a rain garden? Both of his sons just had to have criticism from me, too. But I handle it all. I did it all myself, and it came out really nice. Were this a worker co-op, he wouldn't have anything to say about it, or he would have very little to say. We could have all voted together. Hey, this place looks like shit. Let's do some landscaping to show everyone that we're serious about what we're doing. And one man's opinion couldn't have stopped that. And luckily, I ordered all the plants because again, he doesn't really know what I'm doing. I got the approval from my boss. I ordered all the plants. I had them delivered. So it was a done deal anyway. By the time that the plants were there and I started digging, there was nothing he could have said about it because we couldn't return the plants. But had he known ahead of time, he more than likely would have squashed the plan. And he could have, just because he is the unilateral dictator of that business.
I am boss, only me.
Yeah, basically. So that's what you would be getting with more democracy in the workplace. Anyway, I'm not quite sure how we got off on this topic. I do love talking about it, but I think we should probably get back onto the subject at hand because I'd really like to finish this one up tonight.
She responded, quote, "We cannot push abolitionism forward with all our might until we take up the stumbling block out of the road. If we surrender the right to speak in public this year, we must surrender the right to petition next year, and the right to write the year after, and so on. What then can women do for the slave, when she herself is under the feet of man and shamed into silence?" Angelina was the first woman in 1838 to address a committee of the Massachusetts state legislature on anti-slavery petitions. She later said, "I was so near fainting under the tremendous pressure of feeling." Her talk attracted a huge crowd, and a representative from Salem proposed that, quote, "a committee be appointed to examine the foundations of the State House of Massachusetts to see whether it will bear another lecture from Miss Grimke." Speaking out on other issues prepared the way for speaking on the situation of women. Dorothea Dix, in 1843, addressed the legislature of Massachusetts on what she saw in the prisons and almshouses in the Boston area. Quote, I tell what I have seen, painful and shocking as the details often are. I proceed, gentlemen, briefly to call your attention to the present state of insane persons confined within this Commonwealth in cages, closets, cellars, stalls, pens, chained naked, beaten with rods, and lashed into obedience.
Jeez.
Francis Wright was a writer, founder of a utopian community, immigrant from Scotland in 1824, a fighter for the emancipation of slaves. For birth control and sexual freedom, she wanted free public education for all children over 2 years of age in state-supported boarding schools. She expressed...
See,
Wow.
as I was saying, these ideas are never so out of place that no one has ever thought of them. You know, these are all basically socialist ideas. At a time when I'm not even sure that socialism was in common parlance. Certainly a couple decades, it sounds like, before the Communist Manifesto was written, even. So it's just the only thing that changes is what is in vogue to the masses and what is the cultural meme of the day. But these progressives have always existed.
I think it's interesting too that they bring up like education after the age of 2, considering there's a huge movement now to advocating for education.
Pre-K, yeah.
Yeah, like for pre-K and like daycare and stuff, because like cost of daycare and unavailability of daycare impacts who the most?
Women the most.
Well, women, yes, but like what?
Women that want to work.
Go further than that.
What do you mean? I'm not getting what you.
Like women of color.
Oh, okay.
They're already being oppressed by this system.
Uh-huh.
Employers have no patience for like childcare issues and daycare issues. But daycare is so expensive that it is incredibly difficult to like get everything lined up right so that like you can go to work and your kid is at school. And like another two tangent, stop me, keep going.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you're right. You know, that's it was a huge burden on women then. It is a huge burden on women now. Well, on families, working families, you know, the lower rungs of the working class in particular. It has always been a huge thing because capitalism demands work or starve. And for the poor, that has always meant everybody who can work does work or you all starve.
Well, and I find it upsetting because like they're the anti-abortion like movement, right? They got their way again. And
Yeah.
there's this push to have kids, and it's like the reason people aren't doing it is because it's too damn expensive. Like birth control's free, guys. It's free in most instances. If not pretty affordable out of pocket.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's like
No.
but like you can either spend, I think I was paying like $40 for 3 months worth, which is a lot, but like in the grand scheme of things, it's a lot less expensive than getting pregnant.
Right.
So like,
Absolutely.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, the idea behind Endless Kids is basically to have more
Endless workers.
more subjects, more people that can be brought into the church so that you can feel good about saving more souls, you know, stuff like that.
Like, they don't make any sense in what they want. It would be one situation if it was like, get rid of abortions, but like provide free education and provide all these services.
Well, what they
to the
ultimately
people
want is
having the kids.
control.
We know that. Yeah, I know that. I know, but like, they are masking it as another thing. So if you're going to mask it as something, you might as well just like own your shit. Accountability. Boom.
There you go.
Asked in America what the utopian socialist Charles Fourier had said in France, that the progress of civilization depended on the progress of women. In her words, quote, I shall venture the assertion that until women assume the place in society which good sense and good feeling alike assign to them, human improvement must advance but feebly. Men will ever rise or fall to the level of the other sex. Let them not imagine that they know aught of the delights which intercourse with the other sex can give until they have felt the sympathy of mind with mind, and heart with heart, until they bring into that intercourse every affection, every talent, every confidence, every refinement, every respect, until power is annihilated on one side, fear and obedience on the other, and both restored to their birthright, equality. Women put in enormous work in anti-slavery societies all over the country, gathering thousands of petitions to Congress. Eleanor Flexner writes in A Century of Struggle, quote, Today, countless file boxes in the National Archives in Washington bear witness to that anonymous and heartbreaking labor. The petitions are yellowed and frail, glued together page on page, covered with ink blots, signed with scratchy pens and an occasional erasure by one who fearfully thought better of so bold an act. They bear the names of women's anti-slavery societies from New England to Ohio. In the course of this work, events were set in motion that carried the movement of women for their own equality racing alongside the movement against slavery. In 1840, a World Anti-Slavery Society convention met in London. After a fierce argument, it was voted to exclude women. But it was agreed they could attend meetings in a curtained enclosure. The women sat in silent protest in the gallery, and William Lloyd Garrison, one abolitionist who had fought for the rights of women, sat with them. It was at that time that Elizabeth Cady Stanton met Lucretia Mott and others and began to lay the plans that led to the first women's rights convention
so
in
many
history.
women in that room that curtain would not be enough.
That's a good strategy, yeah.
Suffice.
The women tumbling out of the curtains.
Yeah. Or just put a finger under the curtain. They're like, there, I'm under the curtain. Art thou happy? So perhaps you'd like to see which finger I've put up underneath the curtain.
I think they can guess.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's my favorite bird.
Yeah.
It was held at Seneca Falls, New York, where Elizabeth Cady Stanton lived as a mother, a housewife, full of resentment at her condition, declaring, "A woman is a nobody. A wife is everything." She wrote later, "I now fully understood the practical difficulties most women had to contend with in the isolated household, and the impossibility of woman's best development if, in contact, the chief part of her life with servants and children, the general discontent I felt with woman's portion as wife, mother, housekeeper, physician, and spiritual guide, the chaotic condition into which everything fell without her constant supervision, and the wearied, anxious look of the majority of women impressed me with the strong feeling that some active measures should be taken to remedy the wrongs of society in general and of women in particular. My experiences at the World Anti-Slavery Convention, all I had read of the legal status of women, and the oppression I saw everywhere together swept across my soul. I could not see what to do or where to begin. My only thought was a public meeting for protest and discussion." An announcement was put in the Seneca County Courier calling for a meeting to discuss the rights of women, the 19th and 20th of July. 300 women and some men came. A declaration of principles was signed at the end of the meeting by 68 women and 32 men. It made use of the language and rhythm of the Declaration of Independence. Quote, "When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one portion of the family of man to assume among the people of the earth a position different from that they have hitherto occupied, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
That's amazing that it keeps coming back to that. The Declaration of Independence and that one phrase that everybody knows more than they could pick out a single line from, say, the Constitution or any other founding document. All people are created equal and should be given inalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you know, it just reinforces for me the idea that that sort of language should be used to carry leftism forward. That because that at the heart, that is what we want. We want life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to be inalienable for all people. And for something to be inalienable, it means that no matter what choice you make, whether it's a good one, a bad one, whether you're a victim of circumstance, or whether you just got, you know, you just never had the right opportunity, doesn't matter. You should still be able to be secure in your life, your liberty, and your pursuit of happiness, which would have to mean that nothing you do should be able to take away your health care, because that directly threatens your life. Nothing you do should be able to take away your access to food or shelter, because that too threatens your ability to keep on living. So for something to be inalienable, it shouldn't matter whether or not you, quote unquote, are the deserving poor, or whether you have made all the wrong decisions, but, you know, still you should deserve all of that stuff. And liberty, that gets into things like transportation. If you don't have access to free transportation, you don't have a lot of liberty. If you don't have access to education, you don't have a whole lot of chance to pursue your happiness. So all these basic things that socialists everywhere are fighting for can be found in it, the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That it is like the one good section.
I gotta wash up.
Oh, okay.
My nose is running like crazy.
All right, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's
Did I run you off again?
No,
Okay.
my nose is running. I keep yawning. I feel bad.
No, it's okay. I've been yawning too. I've been tired today. Well, at least say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye.
So anyway, yeah, we should frame things around life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because that's exactly what we want, and it is incredibly hard to argue against that.
Unless you're crazy.
Well, that's true. There's always a wild card.
If I can't make money, you can't do it.
So I'm going to turn off the air conditioner again, so that we can have a little bit less background noise. All right, there we go. All right, so let's continue on. I think we're getting real close. We probably only have about 5 minutes left in the chapter. He seems to be winding up.
The
That's a good one.
history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations on the part of man toward woman, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over her. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Then came the list of grievances. No right to vote, no right to her wages or to property, no rights in divorce cases, no equal opportunity in employment, no entrances to colleges, ending with, quote, he had endeavored in every way that he could to destroy her confidence in her own powers, to lessen her self-respect, and to make her willing to lead a dependent and abject life.
That's right. The life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for women of the day was completely dependent on the men of the day, which means that it was completely alienable to those women. They didn't have any inalienable right to any of that stuff. So, yeah. I guess that's all I had to say about that. But let's
And then a series of resolutions, including, quote, that all laws which prevent woman from occupying such a station in society as her conscience shall dictate, or which place her in a position inferior to that of man, are contrary to the great precept of nature, and therefore of no force or authority. A series of women's conventions in various parts of the country followed the one at Seneca Falls. At one of these, in 1851, an aged black woman who had been born a slave in New York, tall, thin, wearing a gray dress and white turban, listened to some male ministers who had been dominating the discussion. This was Sojourner Truth.
Wow.
She rose to her feet and joined the indignation of her race to the indignation of her sex. The man over there says that woman needs to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches. Nobody ever helps me into carriages and over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me, and ain't I a woman? I would work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well, and ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children, and seen 'em most all sold off to slavery, and when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman?
Ah, that's incredibly powerful. Yeah. And this is the thing, that history is always, or for the most part, is looking at the plight and the life and times of the well-to-do, the middle to upper class, most of the time. That is taken as the average way of looking at things, the average point of view. And yet, the further down the poverty ladder you go, and the more forms of oppression through being one type of minority or another you add on, the more that narrative doesn't really apply. So here's Sojourner Truth. She's done all the same sorts of, she's been through all the same sorts of hardships as poor men of the day went through. So no one really even is thinking about her when they're talking about rights for women and women being an equal standing, because it is always framed in a middle to well-to-do class sort of lens. So that's great, and she keeps repeating the "ain't I a woman" line, which is great. I would be surprised if that's not where Bell Hooks took her book title "Ain't I a Woman" from. One that's been on my list. I think I should probably make that my next audiobook that I get. I've enjoyed her stuff a lot so far that I've read. So yeah, cool, great speech.
Thus were women beginning to resist in the 1830s and 40s and 1850s.
And she's bringing all of this in to show the intersectionality of oppression. So, again, intersectionality is not a new idea. This goes way, way back. The only thing that's different now is that it's more in the public consciousness. So, I mean, that, in a way, that's a good thing. It's good that it's come to the fore. That does represent a type of progress. But it's still kind of on that leading edge somehow. Even now, a couple hundred years later.
The attempt to keep them in their woman's sphere. They were taking part in all sorts of movements for prisoners, for the insane, for black slaves, and also for all women. In the midst of these movements, there exploded with the force of government and the authority of money.
Intersectionality is not that complicated. It's just recognizing that if you have one type of oppression, your circumstances and your experience is probably very similar, or at least has a lot in common with people that have experienced oppression for other reasons. So you might be a person of color. Your experience being oppressed or treated differently because you're a person of color is going to have a lot in common with someone who's been oppressed and treated differently just because they were a woman, or because they were a not straight or something like that. So there's a lot of commonalities, and by looking together at where all of these forms of oppression intersect, we can find the heart of what the problem is. The common oppressor of all of these is the it's the elites. It's the people that control property, and by and large set the rules for society. So when you do that, you can then also link together in your shared struggle, even if it's not exactly the same struggle from person to person. It's definitely not the same to be oppressed for being a black person as it would be, or like being a black man as it would be being oppressed for being a white woman. Different experiences, but you can still use that common experience of being oppressed and being held down by the current system to build solidarity with one another and say, hey, if you'll fight for me, I'll fight for you. And this is how we build up what otherwise could be very fractious micro movements. You know, we want to fight for the rights of this particular minority group, and this other group wants to fight for the rights of this other particular minority group. And each fighting by ourselves, we're very weak. It is only by joining together and helping one another to overcome those, those institutions of oppression that we can have any chance of fighting the system as a whole. And that's why intersectionality is so key. It recognizes the humanity in one another and uses that as a strength and common cause, or to build common cause, and together push with more force than just the sum of its parts.
Quest for more land, an urge for national expansion. So ends Chapter 6 of Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States.
All right. We made it to the end. Well, just a little bit of time left on the clock. I like this chapter quite a bit. It definitely ended on a positive note, for once. There was a lot less genocide in this particular chapter than in some of the previous chapters we've been through. Maybe we'll take a little sneak peek about what's coming up next. So this was The Intimately Oppressed, Chapter 6 of A People's History. As long as grass grows or water runs. Let's see. I'm trying to read in. It looks like we're going to be talking about the Indian Removal Act and the oppression of Native Americans in the next one. I'm going to do a quick search for racial slurs in this chapter, because at some point we're going to get to the point where we're running into, unfortunately, racial slurs, because he uses primary sources. It's never Zinn himself who's editorializing and using a racial slur. It's always some primary source. And in part of the quote, the N-word will come up. And Zinn, wanting to be faithful to the full force of what that person was saying, quotes them directly. That's not to say that we have to hear that word again and again and again to understand what's being said and still have it be impactful. So once we get to those chapters, I'm going to have to be finding a workaround, but it looks like this next one does not have any racial slurs, or at least if it does, I'm not yet able to find them. But I'll look at it a little bit more before our next meeting for this book. So anyway, if you want to actually look at the text itself, there's a free version. I haven't really been talking about this too much. Turn on my Twitch offensive language box. Yeah. No, but my thought is people know what the N-word is. They've heard it. it doesn't need to be said again and again for people to get, whatever is being trying to be conveyed by the message. So when it comes to those chapters, I'm going to have to go through on my own and record an edited version of the audiobook chapter removing racial slurs. And then I will put that out when I will use that version when we continue on in those particular chapters. The next chapter, if you want to see a text version for free, here is a link right now. Historyisaweapon.com has the entire text for free. And it's a searchable text, so I assume that any sort of text-to-speech reader would work with it as well. So if that's the way that you like to go through books, then that's a possibility as well. If you just like reading things with the text, that's a way to do it without having to spend any more money. Although there's worse places you can spend your money than buying an actual physical copy or a digital copy of People's History of the United States. So yeah, let's see, what else is there to announce? Oh, I have not made the official announcement yet, but we're going to be having another. Oh geez, it's just coming up next week, isn't it? We're going to have our fourth Friday, which is going to be the 23rd of September, our fourth Friday leftist karaoke night. So Friday, September 23rd, is going to be the next leftist karaoke night. It was fun last time, even though not as many singers showed up. I had a great audience. Yeah, okay, cool. The reason that I don't read the text out myself, by the way, James, is that I've been told from people that have that like to listen to this in audio form that it's more confusing when I'm having to read the text and then going back and commenting on it. So I like having that different voice. And then also, I tried doing it with State and Revolution for a chapter, reading it out loud, and I got too tired. My voice got too tired by the end of that chapter. So it's just not my ideal way of doing it. I like just finding audiobooks and using them, just pressing play and then reacting myself from time to time. But anyway, Leftist Karaoke Night, Friday, September 23rd, coming up. Not this Friday, but the next. It'll be 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I hope to see you all there. If any of you would like to sing any songs yourself, if you'd like to perform, send me a message on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this on. And I will make sure that you get the invite on the big night. So yeah, James, you have to figure out what song you're gonna request for us. I think, what was the big request last time? Maybe Nirvana, I think. Yeah, I think you had requested, I did Heart-Shaped Box. And then the time before that, of course, was Stairway to Heaven, the iconic rendition that we all tried to do together to mixed effect. Still have not figured out how to do it where we can all see the lyrics and the karaoke lyrics and music and hear the music at the same time. I've only been able to do it where someone of us at least is a fraction of a second delay, and it doesn't work out that well to do duets with even a fraction of a second delay. So if anyone knows of any way to equalize all of that, so like maybe we're all on the same delay where we're seeing the music and or seeing the lyrics and hearing the music all at the same time, and then hopefully able to then send out our voice over the recording at the same time, so it all syncs up. I want everything to be synced up. So if there's a way to sync up everything for all participants, I'd love to know about it. But I haven't figured that part out yet. So right now, it's just the only way to do a duet or a group sing is to have those people physically with you in the same room. Yeah, great. I look forward to whatever you request there, James. That should be fun. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it for me tonight. I will not be on again, since we're still shopping for homes. Not be on again until Sunday night. I think I might start a new project on Sunday nights. The alternate night to the night that to the Sundays that Dan comes on, Dan Platt, because he comes on every other Sunday. So I think the Sunday opposite of those, I might start transcribing and recording, like producing an audiobook of Permaculture: A Designer's Manual, because that still does not exist as far as I know. Yeah, Dan is very cool. I always like having him on the show. So anyway, I was thinking of doing that as a new project. So we'll just go through the text of Permaculture: A Designer's Manual, and it could be fun. It could be something we could all do together, especially when it comes to like interpreting how to convert the graphics, because there's a lot of visuals in Permaculture: A Designer's Manual. So how to represent those as text and put those into the audiobook too. So like do an image description for each figure and figure out how and when to put that into the text to make it more understandable and legible to listeners. But yeah, I was thinking that could be something we could start out on. And then at the end of that project, we would have something really to give to the world. And that's making Permaculture: A Designer's Manual more accessible to everyone who prefers to consume books in audio form. So look forward to that this Sunday, probably around 6 p.m. Central Standard, maybe as late as 7. We'll see. But that'll be the next time that I'm planning on streaming. So I will see you all then. Let's see. Looks like James, you're the only viewer on Twitch right now, but we can still raid. That's still something that we can do. Looks like CripplePunk91 is doing Elder Scrolls. Someone who I met through a Facebook chat of small leftist Twitch streamers. They do a really cool show. So if you are finding this from another platform, here's how you can find CripplePunk91. They're a cool leftist streamer. So I encourage you to check them out. And for those of you joining on the raid, which I think is probably just going to be you, James, but that's great. That's always great to have one person to raid with rather than just me. We will start that raid in just a moment. All right. Thank you all for joining me, and see you all Sunday. Assuming this raid works. Nope. Looks like it did not work for some. Of course. Always has to be some trouble with the raid, doesn't there? So, try raiding the channel yet again. And we will start the raid. There we go. Already somehow raiding. Okay, so maybe it did work. I'm not quite sure. No, it did not work. Whatever.